everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Kaley Gray, and I'm so excited that I have my friend Amie Nelson on the vlog today. And first, if you have not subscribed to this channel, please hit that red button below and follow me on my social media. And I will have Amie's social media as well. And what is so crazy, Amie, we were supposed to do this vlog last fall, but you got pregnant. You have a baby girl on the way. So she was having morning sickness. So we had to reschedule after all of the holidays. And so I'm so excited to have her on. She is going to be sharing her redeeming love story. And so I'm just so grateful that she is going to be sharing that with us today.
So I'll just share a little bit about I'll say my backstory first. And so I grew up as a believer. I grew up in the church and all the things, but it was kind of like as the high school years went on and then into college, I really just started to believe, I would say, lies about myself. At the time, I didn't really recognize it as that, but I come from a stable family, never, wanted for anything. And my parents are still together to this day. And so I had a great example, growing up. And anyhow, so my freshman year of college, I found myself dating somebody really wrapped up in, I was a collegiate athlete, and so was he. And I just started letting, one thing go at a time, right? It's a slow fade. It is a slow fade. And you never just do something without ever experimenting before, right? It's like this slow progression, or this slow progression of the belief of who you are and what you deserve and all these things. And so we started dating, and I just found myself giving myself more away to him. And I didn't recognize it at the time. However, looking back, it was very abusive back then as well. But I had never felt this way with somebody before. I'd never experienced somebody. It was like in the good moments, just so intense. And I became addicted to that cycle. Even though I knew something was off, because I also simultaneously had never been treated so poorly at the same time. Yeah. But I wanted him to know the Lord, although I actually wasn't really living that way at the moment, and, I had gotten out of the church because now I was away at school and in, just the collegiate athlete world. And, but my spirit was disrupted the whole time. I will say that my spirit was disrupted the whole time. But anyways, skipping forward, found out I was pregnant going into my sophomore year of college. We tried to make things work. We actually ended up breaking up. But then when my son was born, we got back together. In that time frame, I really got back with God and was seeking him for my strength, because being 19 and pregnant is not easy. I had to leave all of my dreams at college, and it was really hard. It was heartbreaking for me. Obviously did not grow up or was taught that was something that you do before marriage. So I felt like a huge disappointment. I felt like, well, I was the talk of the town. It was just ugly, and it was embarrassing, and it was just you can't hide being pregnant, right? You can hide a lot of other sins, but you can't hide being 19 and pregnant. And so I carried a lot of shame at first, but God really began working in my life to heal me of that. However, I so desperately wanted to keep my family together. And so once again, as my son was born, his father came back into the picture, and I would say my desire for a family unit became more important to me than waiting on God. And waiting for God to really show me that he had changed or he had not changed. And if this was the person I was to marry. And so I kind of forced this, this idea in my head to happen, because I thought, well, God can heal, God can do anything, God can bring him around. And I was seeing some changes in his life. And so I thought, okay, these are the fruits of him, you know, surrendering to God. And anyways, a year or so into us dating again, we got engaged, then we got married. And I will say things significantly took a turn for the worse pretty quickly. Being a Christian, I think it can be really confusing sometimes when we know what God's capable of, and we're believing for something, and so we're praying desperately and believing, and we're clinging to that, right? Because in a marriage, you also have to honor your husband, right? But what happens then when, you know, abuse seeps in, and you like want to make excuses in your head, like, how do I honor him, and how do I stay together, and how do I fight for this at the same time, right? And so it can become really confusing. And so I became isolated and away from the church in that time frame, because we had moved away from my family, and church became a big fight, a big argument. And so I chose to not do the things that were going to cause problems. And that was, you know, I don't want to say it was a mistake, but you cannot remove yourself from those that can help you, you know? So anyways, we were married for about almost 8 years. Through the years, we had 2 more children, 2 more boys. They're such a blessing. And God is really just, you know, even through the midst of our ugliness, gives you these incredible blessings along the way. But it's hard. It's still hard, you know. I not going into too much detail, but I ended up fleeing because things got really, really bad. I was actually in counseling prior to, in a Christian counseling, and thank you, Jesus, for that, because honestly, that is what saved me. And really, I'll say saved my children, in the sense of having the ability now to see what a godly marriage looks like. And so, you know, I had this deep fear that even if I like bear down, grit and bear it, you know, kind of thing through all these years of marriage, like my biggest fear wasn't just that, you know, obviously it was very unhealthy, but my kids would begin then to emulate that and think it was okay. And I know I chose, you know, singleness over, you know, having some sort of stability in their life and godly example, and safety for them and myself, versus sticking something out just because in the Bible it says, you know, God hates divorce. Well, God also hates abuse. So coming out of that, it was a really ugly divorce. It's still ugly, and we're almost 6 years out. We attempt to co-parent together, and it is very difficult. But in that time, God really, you know, he has written this beautiful redemptive story. And I tell all of the story because there were massive mistakes and sins and evil things I exposed myself to, and lies I believed, you know, all the way back before I was 19, that led me to that point, that led me to, you know, my abusive marriage and then my divorce, right? And so I sat one day in my yard, just like kind kind of asking God, this was after we had split up, and I was just like, God, how did this happen? Like, how did I get here? Never in a million years would I think that I would be, a single mom divorced before I'm 30 years old. Like, never, And so he kind of just revealed to me, Amie, you have a responsibility here too. And, sometimes that's hard to hear because you have been so beat down and broken down and, abused or whatever. But there is always a responsibility that we too have to take. And he kind of drew me back to all these things all the way through high school that I just began to believe, like, dwindle my worth and not believe who God made me to be. And that's where my healing began, was when I saw all of these things that I slowly faded away from the Lord and faded away in my belief in who I was in the Lord. And because of that, it led me to this broken place. And so I was really able then to surrender that and ask for forgiveness and repent of those things. And then I really began to look at my life. Like, where am I still not just believing the lies, but maybe not representing myself in the way that I would attract that godly man that I so desired. Yeah. And so, God has blessed me with an incredible godly man. Our marriage is so beautiful. Sometimes it's hard for me to, look back at how drastic my life has changed in the last 6 years. Because it was so ugly and bad and awful. And the things that I went through every single day, were so awful compared to now. Like, the freedom that God has given me in my life and in my marriage and in my family life. Now my boys have an incredible example of what a godly husband looks like, what a godly father looks like. But it took work. It took work on my behalf. I think too many times when we sit in singleness, we get caught up in, especially if you're a single mom, I will say, especially if you are, I'm going to speak to the single moms here, because it is so difficult. And we have such a desire, like, for our children to have a father, or for us to have a helper, and a mate and somebody to cherish us, that we compromise. And, too many times we get so focused on that thing that we want, just like I had mentioned when I was a single mom at 19, we want that so bad that we neglect what God could do for us if we just focus on serving him. And I see too often, so many times people have reached out to me and they've been like, oh my gosh, Amie, like, your marriage is so beautiful, or your engagement is so beautiful. Like, I want that so desperately. And there are these single moms that are reaching out to me, and, so often the reason why God hasn't brought them the right person, or they continue to find themselves in these broken relationships, or these relationships where, the man is not honoring and cherishing her, it's simply because we choose to take matters into our own hands. And truly, that is it. Yeah. There's a few things that, like, I really, it stuck in my mind as I was going through my singleness was, become the person that the person I'm looking for is looking for. And so I was like, okay. And I wrote it down. I was like, okay, first I have to define the husband I want, right? Like, what does he do? Where does he go? How does he speak? What kind of friends does he hang around? Like, I had to define all of it. I was like, I'm not messing up again. I'm not going through all this pain again. Forget it, So I was like, I'm not going there, right? So I wrote that down. And then I had to write, okay, well, if that's what he looks like, and those are things he's doing and how he's serving and how he's, you know, in the church and he's, you know, doing missions and all these things, then what the heck should I be doing?
Right? That's so good. Yeah.
So when I thought about that, I was like, okay, like I can't even actually try to find that. I can't even try to find that person. I just need to focus on the things that I need to do in order to become that person that that man, my future husband, would be attracted to and would be looking for. And I will tell you, this can go deep. Like, it doesn't just go to, you know, how you're spending your free time and, you know, how much you read your Bible and things like that. But like, how are you dressing? You know, this is something that I talk to my girlfriends about all the time. I'm like, babe, I love you, and like, I know you love Jesus, but look how you're presenting yourself. You're not going to attract that godly man who wants somebody for the rest of his life when you're showing the rest of the world everything, you know? And it can be really difficult, especially I feel nowadays, because so much has become acceptable. And this has been a transition of mine, because I work for myself, and I have my social media is really my business page.
Yeah.
These are my own convictions. So I'm sharing this because God was like, yo, Amie, no more of this. You know?
Wow.
Especially coming from the fitness industry, that was really difficult to navigate, you know? Like, how do I do this in a way that's not, you know, could potentially be provocative or showing too much skin, or, you know, it's really confusing. And I know Christians have very different views on this, and, you know, they can say, well, she's not posed provocatively, even though she's working out in a sports bra and this and that.
Yeah.
Right. But we have to look at from a man's view, and they're so different than us women. And so, although I might be like, whatever, like, yeah, we work out in our sports bras, that's fine. But like, if that's what you're presenting to the world, what's coming back to you?
Yeah.
And it can be hard. And believe me, it took years of me figuring this out, of God continually honing me, right? That's that honing factor, of becoming, you know, more and more like him and who he wants you to be. And that was a conviction of mine. So, you know, if you scroll way back on my stuff, you'll be like, okay, I see it, you know? And so, and I leave it there for that purpose, you know, for people to see this transformation that has occurred in my life. Because it's exactly that. It's not in a blink of an eye. It's not, you know, just an immediate thing. It is this continual seeking God every day. What else, God, do you want me to surrender? What is that next step you need me to take? And the other thing that I really thought about all the time is go to the right places, find the right people. And so I was very purposeful where I spent all of my time when I was single. And I'll tell you, a lot of the time it was choosing to stay home alone. And that really stunk. And it was really hard. I mean, there were countless nights that I cried on my floor out to God, you know, when people had asked me to go out and they had asked me to go to, you know, the bar or whatever. And those things in itself are not evil. So I'm not saying you can't go there, but you also know what you're surrounding yourself with when you step into an atmosphere like that. And so countless times I stayed home, and it was lonely. It was not fun, especially, you know, when my kids were with their dad, and you know, and then all of this, you know, this isn't fair. This is, you know, like all of these things just come flooding into you.
Yeah. And
I decided in that moment that, you know, okay, God, whatever you want me to do, like, I'm gonna do it. Like, I'm not going to seek any man out. It says in the Bible that, you know, the husband will find a wife. So us women need to stop chasing. We need to stop going and seeking. We need to like do what God's calling us to do, and he will bring the right person right alongside you. I firmly believe that. If you focus on your call and your mission, he will bring. Pretty soon you're going to look over and that man will be right next to you.
Yeah.
And so, and not everybody shares that same view. I'm not saying if you do go dating apps and all these things, you're wrong. I'm not saying that, because God doesn't say it's wrong. Okay. But for me, that is really what he spoke to me, was just focus where I want you to be. Mm-hmm. And, you know, stop looking around, stop, you know, getting distracted, run your race. And pretty soon you're going to look over and your husband, future husband's going to be running right next to you. And truly that is what happened. That's what happened. I was in my business, you know, I was thriving and doing things that God had called me to in my business, which was a scary transition that I took. But I knew like God was saying, do this, which is actually where I met my husband. Never did I think that was the case. I thought I was going to meet him at church or at a conference for church, or, you know, like, no, I didn't. But I was involved in my church. I was serving every second I could get in my church. I was at church. Like, my kids, God bless them, but they were probably they're like, Mom, we were at church Friday service.
Yeah, because you took them with you, right?
Mm-hmm. I included them in everything. There was, at that time, there was like a young adults group at my church. And I just squeaked by because I was just barely 30. And it was like, it went to 30. And I was like, I know I'm too old for this group. And I know I'm like the only person here with kids, but I don't care. Like, I was so hungry for God, and I was so hungry for the word. And my kids came with. And I didn't care anymore. I didn't care what other people thought about me. I didn't care if people were going to judge me. I was not there for anybody else other than to seek God and just be hungry for him and his people. And so I did. I got into small groups. I was leading small groups, you know, and here I went from literally being so deprived of being in a church to throwing myself in. And it was uncomfortable. Like, I'm not gonna lie, these things are not comfortable, right? The very first small group I joined was a divorce care group. And it was right in the middle. I think it was the fall so we separated in June, and it was the fall. It was like, I knew I had to jump in immediately. Wow. And I told myself, I know there's going to be days you don't want to go. I know there's going to be a million excuses. I know you're going to be like crying your eyes out before you have to go one time, or so upset or whatever, but you're going. Like, yeah. Come hell or high water, you are going. Yeah. I don't care if I had to drag myself there, you know, mentally while I was wiping tears away. I knew I just had to be there. And, that's exactly what happened. You know, there were days when I'm like, oh, I cry before I get in there, whatever. But my point in that is, we have to be so hungry for God, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you're doing it completely alone.
So good.
You have to do it. That has to be your main priority, because God's going to bring all the rest to you. God's going to bring the husband. He's going to bring, you know, the blessing. He's going to bring the next job. He's going to, you know, whatever that looks like. And that is his redemptive story. But we have to be willing to make sacrifices and make him first. Like, are we really making him first in every area of our lives, to allow room for him to move and for him to give us that blessing, right? It's like that. Have you seen that meme where it's that little girl holding onto that teddy bear?
Oh yeah.
Haven't seen this? Yeah. So it's a little girl like standing in front of Jesus with this like little itty bitty teddy bear, and she's like clinging to it, right? Yeah. And God has this huge teddy bear behind his back, or Jesus has this huge teddy bear behind his back, and he's like, just trust me, give me the teddy bear. And you can tell she's like, no. Like, she's so afraid to lose that thing. Yeah. She can't see or trust God enough to give her the big thing. And we need to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah.
What are those vices in our life, those things in our life we are so desperately holding on to? We are so terrified to give it up because we think, if I give this relationship up, if I give, this dating up, if I give drinking up or going out, whatever, if I give this up, then I'm really going to be alone. Then I'm never going to find it. We tell ourselves these lies that are not true.
Yeah.
And God's like, you're my daughter. I'm going to take care of you. I love you so much. I have more than you could ever imagine. Just give it over. And he's waiting for that moment when we surrender everything. And truly, it says that he will give exceedingly and abundantly more than we could ever ask or think. And sister, he will. And you know what? It's not always in our own time, right? It's not always when we want. But I promise that as we surrender daily and as we grow closer daily, he's also going to fill that void. So you're not so desperate, right? You're not so thirsty, they call it these days, because he's your water. He is your living water. And so you become content. Literally right before I met my husband, I was like, God, I'm content with just you. Like I am so content with just loving you and you loving me, and I can do this alone. Like if that is the plan you have for me, I can do this alone. Because ultimately we don't know his plan. Although I do believe, when we have a desire in our heart for marriage and things like that, God gives us those desires. And that's his whole purpose of Adam and Eve, is to procreate, right? Yeah. To go and multiply and fill the earth. So I firmly believe he will do that. Sometimes it takes longer than we would like. But he's always faithful. And we can't forget that. He is faithful. And we have to let go of the timelines. We have to let go of, I'm not going to have as many eggs now, whatever.
Yeah.
We need to let that go. And just trust him, because he is such a good father. And he will give exceedingly and abundantly more than we could ever ask or think.
Wow. Amie, thank you so much just for sharing this testimony and just being like such an encouragement. And I think you gave so many like practical things that people can do, but just like the main thing that the takeaway I think is your identity. Like you need to know your identity of who you are in Christ and just get involved, find that community, find those people to surround you and run your race. Is what you need to do. So I love this. Well, thank you so much for being on the vlog, and I will see you guys all next week.